Working It Out, a podcast show about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces, our communities, and our lives. A show where we put diversity and inclusion to work.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out. Dr. V.
On today's episode of Working It Out, we're exploring the personal story of an accomplished businessman, a professional who has overcome adversity. Achieving excellence in one's field doesn't mean that that journey was without discrimination, bias, or other types of potentially career-halting experiences. My guest today will share how his story, describe how he persevered, and explain how the experience has shaped who he is today. I'm joined today by Chuck West. Chuck, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Chuck, you look like a baby, like a young teenager, but this track record of achievements that you have really indicates that you've really been very focused and determined and successful. In fact, you've produced Broadway productions, you've produced theatrical productions with David Talbert, and now you're president of OCTET Productions, and you've produced about 12 films already?
Yes.
Chuck, interestingly, you didn't start out being a theatrical producer. In fact, you have a degree in finance, correct? And accounting.
Yeah.
So how in the world did you go from finance and accounting to being a big time TV producer, film producer?
Well, what people don't know is that accounting is a very important part of producing. I've always been very good with numbers, and I transferred that skill over to the general managing and producing. I started putting budgets together, and then from putting budgets together, I started general managing, and then from general managing, I started producing. So it was just steps that I took based on my accounting and my numbers background.
So you really knew the fundamentals of the business. So then the creative parts of the business, you could also get engaged in that part of the work within the context of managing the finances of the business.
You're very valuable in the entertainment industry when you can keep people on budget.
That is so true. And I think there are not very many African-American men who do the work that you do, who pursued the career that you pursued.
Well, I am the only African-American male that has toured, general managed, and produced off-Broadway and urban theater. I've come from a very small pool of people.
I see. Well, we want to get into this story that you're going to share with us, because being one of the only and then one of the few African-American men in this line of business really suggests that there are probably a whole lot of obstacles that you've had to overcome in the course of doing. I'm just curious, as you think about being a Black man in this space, what are some obstacles that you've had to overcome?
Well, there's actually so many. Early on in my career, my actual job was to settle shows on the road. I was settling Broadway shows and settling urban shows.
What does settling mean? Excuse me, but
Settling means I would go into the box office and negotiate the expenses that the show occurred with the building managers or whoever the building had handling their business affairs. So I was the point person for the promoter that actually put the show on for that week.
So you were accountable for the revenue that was generated from ticket sales and what other sales that occurred, correct? You had to reconcile all of that.
Yes.
And that's where that finance and accounting expertise came into play, obviously.
That was my mama.
So tell me about what happened early in your career that you felt was affected because of your race or age or gender. Tell us your story.
I think one of the turning points in my career was I was 3 years into actually settling shows, and I went to a box office. I would actually go into the box office, and I was denied access to a box office in Dallas. And they told me that they would not let me in to settle the show. So I called my boss at the time, and he was a white Italian guy, so he was a little racist himself. The he told me, "Don't worry about it. He'll work it out." So when I came back to the office, he told me that they said that they were intimidated by you being a black man coming into the office. I'm bald headed and I'm tall.
And you were intimidating because you were bald headed and tall.
Yes, it's the strangest thing to me because I hadn't incurred that before. I incurred racism before, absolutely, but in my field where I had already been doing work, I hadn't before.
You had a
So,
reputation.
so a very good friend of mine told me that it's because of my appearance. And I'll never forget, he took me to Today's Man in Dallas, and I changed my entire wardrobe. I got khakis, loafers, button downs. At that point, I learned a very valuable lesson that no matter how much I am in those circles, I'm really not in those circles. But it's all about how you handle those adversities. The way I chose to handle it is, okay, well, I'm going to adapt to what needs to happen because my end goal is to be the best at what I do. So I have to work harder, I have to work longer, and I have to show people that this is not just a tall, black, bald-headed man. This is someone that really knows the business and knows it well. So I had to be outstanding.
Did they allow you to come in once you changed your attire, or did it matter?
Yes, the next time I came back to that venue, which was the next year, they absolutely did.
Well, this is such an interesting conversation because we're at a stage in the workplace where there's this debate on how people should look when they come to work. Some feel like it should be very casual. Some feel like they should be suited down or put a jacket on, like what I have on, even talking to you today on our podcast. Sometimes that's a generational debate. I've often noticed that many times the younger folks say, hey, just focus on what I do, not how I look. Does that still remain a derailer or a barrier, particularly for Black men?
Absolutely, but it's a little different now. We've evolved into a place where it's more acceptable, but you still have to dress the part.
A lot of times we talk about and think about the challenges that we face because of our race or our gender or sexual orientation, or whatever that diversity element can be. But what have been the blessings you've experienced because of who you are?
I have a platform that I can make available to other people of color. I can afford to give them a chance to have on-the-job training, which is something that's very important in the entertainment field today because everybody's getting the knowledge that they have through classrooms. To get the leg up is to know someone that is actually producing films, producing plays, that you can attach to, that you can learn how it actually works in the field. My biggest blessing is now I can give back to those people. I do a lot of work with Duke Ellington School of the Arts, Bowie College, Howard University. All of the students, they have a company head that they shadow in each one of my productions. Every day that we go out to shoot, there's someone there that is learning from a professional. And that is, to me, one of my biggest blessings today.
We did a show earlier, a podcast earlier. We were talking about internships and what has been the impact of COVID on internships for Black and Brown college students. And what we found is that it has been a significant impact. It's been a cut for like 20 to 30% less internships for young people of color. So the fact that you're providing that kind of support, that kind of service, that kind of training is phenomenal. So you and I were talking about so many experiences that you had that were challenges that you faced because you were a Black man in an area of business that very, very few had been successful in. Share with us another one of those stories, and particularly how you were able to overcome it.
Another one of the stories that stands out to me is at a venue, we always have union workers that break down the set, that handles all the closeout for the shows. And I'm in charge of that as well. And those old union guys are the old white guy network. They are definitely not used to taking orders from a young Black man. So it created a problem in one of the theaters. One of the stewards, which is the lead, the head guy for the union on site, told me that he and his workers were not going to work as long as I was in the building. So I called my boss again and I told him what was going on. But this time it was a little different because I had to be there. So my boss called his boss. And so what ended up happening is that he had to be the one that ended up leaving the building. But what this showed me again was there's two different sets of rules. They can do and say what they want when they want to, but for us, we have to abide by a different set of rules. We have to go by, okay, well, this is the job, the task that needs to be done, and we're going to do the task. For them, they can say, okay, we don't want to do the task because we don't like the environment. We don't have that opportunity. So what that showed me is that I have to create my own environment. I have to be my own boss. I have to not have to call people to speak for me on my behalf to make things right. I need to be able to be in a position where I can say, well, if you're not going to be in the building with me, you can go and take all your workers that do not want to be in here and I'll replace you.
So did that influence your creating OCTET Productions?
Absolutely. It creates a burning fire inside of you that makes you want to succeed. So I started with another company, West Entertainment, and then I created OCTET when I met my wife 8 years ago. So now we build as a team. We have to lead. We have to be the bosses. And then we have to show our children and our next generation that it's possible to run and own your own company, to make your own decisions, and to thrive in doing it.
Well, I'm excited to hear about that because one of my clients, Procter & Gamble, has this effort called Widen the Screen. And in Widen the Screen, they're looking at how can they get more Black and brown producers, general managers, owners, to have more of the share in theatrical productions, in television and film. And what I hear you saying is that you made that determination several years ago, 8 years ago, or really even before then with West Vision. And now with OCTET, that's what you're doing. So I need to connect you with the folks at P&G so that you can continue widening the screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chuck, I was really touched when you talked about that experience when the union people didn't want to work with you. And in fact, the shop steward left, and how they created a fire in you to say, you know what? I'm going to get to the point where I own my own business and I'm going to be the boss. I'm going to set the tones. I'm going to determine what the criteria are for people who are going to work for me. So now you're into OCTET Productions. And like I told our listeners before, you have 12 films that you produce. So tell us a little bit about how that fire that got you to start your own business. How is it showing up now? What are you doing in OCTET?
To piggyback on the whole union situation, so now we hire the union.
You hired the union.
Yes, we are the people that hire from the production assistants all the way up to the director of the projects. We've done 6 projects with BET. We've done a few with Lifetime, a few with UMC, All Black. And we are actually in post-production of a film right now for BET. But what that fire did for me is we are in a position right now where we pick and choose our projects because everyone always is trying to tell our stories outside of us. So what we've done is we can say no. We've been offered to do different types of projects, but we refuse to show African-American men and female in bad lights. We always promote family, and that's what OCTET is about. The space that OCTET is in right now is that we have not only have the platform to hire people, but we have the platform to choose the productions to put those people in.
So what's a particular lesson that you've learned in terms of starting OCTET, you know, that you really built on from the other lessons that you, or some of the other adversities? What have you infused in yourself to be like an operating principle and an operating norm?
I think the biggest thing that I take from what I've learned in my experience is that that you continue to grow. Then you're never in a place that you can't learn. And you have to, especially as a business owner, you have to be able to be versatile. You can't do things just your way. You have to take advice from other people and discern what and how you're going to move forward, because it's always a learning experience. And I'm still learning today, even though we're at a place right now where we're comfortable in our decision making. We as OCTET, as a company, we still take advice and learning lessons from others. And I think as long as you're open to that, then you'll continue to grow.
Well, thank you so much for that. In fact, that's an incredible tip to make, because as a business owner myself, you only as good as the people that you have around you. Absolutely. And when I hear you talk about it, it's like a humbleness of spirit, that you allow yourself to not know, to not have to have all the answers, and be able to absorb what other people have, gifts other people have to give you. So I really am excited that you shared that with us as well. And I guess you learned that from your experiences as well on the road. It's not always the things that are painful, but also the things that you can celebrate, that you continue to celebrate and build on in your work. Well, I just really, really want to thank you for that. So if you had one of those young people that you talked about in terms of providing them exposure and helping them learn the trade, what would you tell them is the first thing they need to really think about in terms of entering into this, into film production? What would you tell them?
Understand it's not an easy road. You have to take the good and the bad, but you have to take the bad and look at it not as a bad situation, but as a learning experience, and grow on it. All those experiences I had, racial, non-racial experiences that I had coming into where I am now, I use each one of them as a stepping stone to be a better me. And you always have to look to be a better you.
I love that, to be a better me, to be a better you. One of the aspects that's important in this conversation that we're having is for you to share with our listeners 2 or 3 points of advice that you would like to leave with them in terms of dealing with some of the challenges brought on by your race or gender diversity. Well, give us one, because you've already given us several, but what is one that you will want to leave us with?
One point of advice is follow your dream. Don't let anyone tell you cannot, because what that did, when people told me, okay, well, you can't, you won't, I said, I will, and I am. So you have to continue on your own journey, and your journey is different from the next person's journey.
Okay, follow your dream. And when they followed the dream like you did, not only did you follow the dream, but you invested in preparing yourself to actualize that dream. So I really, again, want to thank you for being part of our show, sharing some of your stories around some of the adversity that you experienced, but more importantly, how you overcame that diversity, and not only that, to really thrive in an area that you have passion for. So again, I want to thank our guest today, Mr. Chuck West, CEO, President of OCTET Productions, and an incredible film producer. So watch out for his next 2 or 3 films that are coming down. We're going to put them on our website so we can stay connected with you, Chuck. So thank you so much, Chuck, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out, and we're going to close out our show. Be safe, productive, and happy.
Working It Out is brought to you by Alignment Strategies, a management consultancy with more than 3 decades of experience in diversity, equity and inclusion, and organizational development. To learn more, visit alignmentstrategies.com.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.